Hi, welcome to Storytime with David Booker. Today we're going to continue on with the Legend Creation, and we're getting to the end of what we'll read in this book very soon. We're about two chapters away. So I'm sorry to say, that's if you want to hear more, get the book. It's really worth getting. Pick it up on Amazon or pretty much anywhere fine books are sold. So today we're going to continue on with chapter 15, an ingenious plan. So if you remember, they're on the pirate ship and not exactly in the best situation possible. They've been locked in a room by the reformed pirates who aren't that reformed. So let's get going. The scruffy bunch of reformed sailors said, "Arr!" and "Shiver me timbers" a lot as they locked the doors with the biggest padlocks they could find. Having no further orders and high on adrenaline, they were hoping for a little resistance, but none came. The crew of misfits indulged in a mass brawl on the top deck. Across the corridor from Team Cogs and Clocks, Zodiac listened to the sound of fighting spilling into his room from above. He sighed and sat down to read a book. His accommodation was very comfortable. It had a large single bed and plenty of room for a desk and a generous reclining chair to relax in. Team Cogs and Clocks were not so lucky. Their room was like a packed commuter railway carriage. Crappy two-car train, a complete and utter inadequate excuse for public transportation, cramming as many people into as small area as possible. The only free space was up above, and Stan had discovered it, escaping the sardine-like conditions by scrambling up to the beams and back across the ceiling. "Well, hey!" he shouted for no apparent reason. Lying on his bunk, Derek stared up at the ceiling, looking thoughtful. "Stan, are there any loose panels up there?" "No, don't know. Hang on." Stan pushed at the wooden ceiling panels. "Woo! Found one!" "Shh," Derek whispered. "We don't want to alarm the captain and his crew." Stan nodded and pushed the board upwards. It gave way just enough so you could peer inside. "What do you see?" said Barry, holding his stomach. Derek just couldn't resist. "Maybe it's a sea," and he fell about sniggering. Stan ignored the crap joke and peered out through the little gap between the lip of the board and its frame. "It's a wooden conduit. It looks like a space between the decks." "This is perfect," said Bernard, peering up into the hole. "We can scuttle from one end of the ship to the other undetected." "So now we can move about the ship undetected. How does that help us?" said Austin. The team stared at one another for a while with blank faces. "Well, we could manipulate the rudder," said Reg, who was lying in his bunk reading a cycling magazine. "What's that, Reg?" said Derek. Reg gave Derek a dirty look. Sorry, I meant to say, what was that, Steve?" Reg acknowledged the apology and continued. "Assuming the space between the deck leads all the way to the stern, I'm certain we should have access to the rudder post. We manipulate it and use our dear friend Craig here to navigate us." There was a stunned silence as the team looked at one another open-mouthed. "What a brilliant idea," said Colin, buttering yet more bread. Reg nodded. "Of course it is." Austin looked thoughtful. "Assuming we find the rudder post, how do we manipulate it? With our bare hands?" "Have faith, my dear Craig," said Reg with a smile. "All we need is a hammer, a rope, and two thick nails." "And who's Craig again?" said Austin. Morris Hammer was standing out on the small prow deck of the LS Splinter, facing the prow. Sitting on a small reclining chair behind him, Buckswad watched the huge henchman with fascination as he appeared to lap at the wind. Bucks thought he looked like a dog hanging out the window of a car being driven at speed. Troll appeared from nowhere and landed on the deck. Morris Hammer picked it up with his shovel hands, trying not to squash the bird. Clumsily, he unraveled the piece of paper attached to his leg and held it up to his face. He turned the paper round and round, examining it with a confused look. "Morris," said Buckswad wearily, "give it to me. You obviously can't read." Morris handed over the now screwed up message. "Well, what does it say?" Bugs held up chubby finger as he read through the communique and smiled. It appears your plan is working. Captain Tinfoil is on course for Yellowstone Port. Morris grunted his satisfaction. All we need now is for Captain Shellshack from the LS Tangerine to do his job, and we're home free, Buck continued. Morris grunted again as he walked off along the deck, the board bowing beneath his weight. Where are you going? Buck said, surprised he had even asked. Poetry class. They have a class for beginners today in the recreation room on the lower deck. Buck stared at the giant man dressed in his traditional dark suit and open-neck shirt and wondered how on earth he was going to make a delicate pot with his humongous hands. He was speechless. The LS Tangerine, a fine ship, was pulling through the water at a respectable rate of knots, her sails billowing in the wind as she carved through the sea. Below deck in their tiny room, the girls from Team Lipstick and Shoes were busy applying lipstick, polishing their shoes, washing the hair, and generally doing girly stuff that took girls 20 times longer to do than boys. In the wheelhouse, Captain Shellshack discreetly altered his course towards Yellowstone Port and smiled. He then ordered his cabin boy to write a message and send it by crow to the LS Splitter. The girls were none the wiser. On board the LS Potato Pie, Reg crawled through the gap between the decks toward the stern of the ship, found what he was looking for, and grinned. In front of him, a long, rounded wooden shaft rotated occasionally as it made its way down towards the tiller and the rudder. Reg beamed with delight and tapped the post. His plan was going to work. He tilted his head upwards, his eyes tracing the length of post until it disappeared onto the deck above on its way towards the helmsman wheel. Happy with his discoveries, he crawled back towards the ship's cramped cabin. Around the same time, dropping out of a hole in the ceiling like a ninja warrior, Bernard Bianchi landed quietly on the floor of the storage room. He scanned the room. Rope and nails, he muttered to himself. Where will I find? Heavy footsteps sounded in the corridor outside. Bernard left behind a couple of barrels, and moments later, the only door into the small wooden storage area was flung open wide, flooding the room with light as the recognizable figures of Scar and Patch crossed the threshold. Bloody duck, muttered Patch. Why can't he have proper bird like a parrot? Scar shrugged as he searched through crates looking for Dario, the duck's favorite treat, roasted chicken. Should just give it bread, arg, Patch continued. Scar looked at it from the crate. Yeah, we shouldn't. It'd be bad for him. You're what? Bread, it ain't good for a duck. It clogs him up, see? But Dario loves a bit of roasted chicken. I'm gonna drink real quick. Patch stared at Scar in confusion. Surely eating chicken is cannibalism. Scar smiled. How can it be? Dario's a duck, not a chicken, you idiot. Oh, yeah. Behind the barrel, Bernard rolled his eyes. Here it be, said Scar. Roast chicken flakes, premium brand. Scar picked up the crate and headed out the door. Patch turned to follow, but stopped in his tracks and sniffed the air. What is it? Scar whispered. Not sure. It's an odd smell. Patch sniffed and turned around. Behind the barrel, Bernard carefully loaded his Diablo as Patch stepped towards his hiding place, taking deep sniffs. Patch looked around as if trying to gauge what the smell was. As he stretched his hand out towards the barrel, a familiar angry sound burst from Captain Tinfoil's quarters. Whack! Whack! Come on, Patch, Dario's hungry, said Scar. Patch turned to his pirate mate, scanned the room one last time, and shrugged. Me hearty. I received far too little plunder to be a security guard. And the two pirates left the small storeroom with a pallet of roast chicken flakes, premium brand. Bernard let out a sigh of relief and disengaged his Diablo. Once he was sure it was safe, he sniffed his armpits and frowned. Well, there was no foul smell emitting from them. Wondered what Patch had smelt. Pushing the thought to the back of his mind, he continued with his mission. The storeroom was lined from floor to ceiling with shelves housing crates and brown bags full of all kinds of stuff. Barrels of fresh water were scattered randomly around the room. Bernard eyed a couple of thick, heavy nails that had been hammered into a wooden pillar to secure weighty bags of pirate loot. He grinned as luck was in. He crept towards the bags and lifted them off the nails with ease, as if they were empty, and placed them on the floor. The nails had been sunk three-quarters of the way into the wood. Prizing them out was going to take time, and time was a luxury Bernard just didn't have. He grabbed hold of the first nail, did a quick calculation in his head, and worked out a special financial investor's mathematical formula that would release the first nail. He tugged at the nail in a series of controlled maneuvers, making sure the correct calculated angle and was incorporated in each pull. After only 2 minutes, the first nail gave up its resistance and dropped into his hand. Bernard repeated the process with a second nail and nodded with smug satisfaction as he thought about the math's degree. Scanning the room for anything that resembled a hammer, he found a heavy bar with a blunt end. Pocketing the bar, he climbed back up into the gap, replaced the wooden tile, and crawled back towards his teammates. While Bernard was busy acquiring the nails for Reggie's plan, Barry Baza Bianchi and Stanley Stan Cogsworth were preparing to execute Mission Rope-a-Dope, a daring plan to snatch a length of rope stashed at the bow on the top deck. Barry's slender figure slid along the conduit with ease. Stan's bulkier frame, on the other hand, hindered his momentum. He cursed every other second, banging his elbows and cracking his head. On reaching a vertical conduit that led upwards, they crawled up a space between the walls, coming to a stop against the outside or underside of the top deck flooring. Oddly, a loose panel happened to be located exactly where they needed to exit the conduit. Some might have thought it was planned. "Ready, Stan?" Barry whispered. Stan nodded as he checked his pockets for the ninth time. Everything was still there. Barry eased up the wooden panel, peered around the top deck, and quickly dropped it back into position. He held his finger to his mouth and looked back up at the boards. The panel creaked as weight bore down on it, sending dust particles on their heads. Above them, voices could be heard. "Ye be on night watch then, will ye?" The second pirate grunted. He didn't seem happy about it. "Shiver me timbers, I'm off to me pit." Another grunt followed, and the panel creaked once again as the weight moved away. Barry pointed his fingers up towards the panel, indicating that the night watch pirate was sitting inches from where they would emerge. "What do we do?" said Stan, showing signs of agitation. Stan didn't like to do nothing, but at the best of times, and doing nothing in a tight, hot, sweaty place was not helping at all. Mother Nature's personal cloud hovered undetected above the dweller's tunnel as she watched with fascination the stupidity of Clayton Sneer play out. He was still in the company of the dwellers, and his stay appeared to be extending by the minute. Pringle was counting. "That will be 27, Mother Nature." "Is that a record?" "I do believe it is." Mother Nature watched as Clayton Sneer was tossed back into the tunnel yet again. "That will be 28 times." Mother Nature nodded, captivated by the inability of certain individuals to learn from their mistakes. "Where is the peloton now?" Pringle, sitting on a small stool by Mother Nature's feet, looked up at her commanding presence as she eyeballed him, waiting for an answer she had wanted 5 minutes before the question had even been raised. And even though she knew the exact location of the peloton. "They are currently crossing the Sea of Biscuits, Mother Nature," Pringle replied. The mother of the ledge appeared deep in thought. "Are they heading in the right direction?" Pringle paused as he checked the report. "It would appear that one ship is heading in the right direction, and the other two." Pringle already knew that Mother Nature had the answer to her own question, but he still replied obediently. Well, the LS Potato Pie and the LS Tangerine appeared to be heading towards Yellowstoneport rather than Mother's Landing. Mother Nature stroked her chin and stood up, straightening her apron. She walked to the edge of the cloud and stared out into a vision of paradise, flock of yellow birds flew by as she remained silent for a moment. And why do you think they are doing that? Well, looks as though someone is cheating Mother Nature. It does. And what am I supposed to do about that, Frangle? I'm not sure you can do anything about it, Mother Nature. You yourself implemented the non-interference policy on the ledge. Mother Nature returned to her polished wooden chair. Sitting down, she tutted. The cushion supporting her back was clearly too thin. Pushing her glasses back into position, she said, I did, didn't I? I, I believe someone will need to intervene on my behalf. Frangle nodded and let a couple of seconds tick by. Mr. Jacksaw, your plant on the Celestia Pie, has been busy with his mini saw. Mother Nature showed no response and merely tutted several times at how uncomfortable her chair really was. The loose panel in the ceiling of the bunk room was lifted with death silence, and Bernard dropped through, standing on all fours and practically purring like a cat high on some illegal narcotic. I got a hammer and the nails, he said triumphantly, standing tall with his hands on his hips. His reception was not what he'd hoped for. Reg, who was writing a note to himself for when or if he ever got his memory back, acknowledged Bernard with a gentle nod. The rest of Team Cosmopox barely noticed his arrival. You've been that quiet. Oh, please don't queue up and thank me, Bernard muttered to himself. He placed the heavy bar of nails by Reg and climbed into his bunk looking dejected. Inside the tight vertical space underneath the forecastle, Stanley Cogsworth twitched like a teenager on heat. It's gone very quiet. Do you think he's asleep? Stan whispered. Barry strained his ears. I think I can hear him snoring. Barry eased up the hatch a little and scanned the area. Pirate's stretched out feet were within a foot of their exit hatch. His eyes worked their way up the recumbent figure, scanning the pirate for any movement. Straining forward, and he could just make out the head of the pirate resting against a barrel. He was sleeping like a baby. The tall, thin cyclist carefully replaced the hatch and whispered to Stan, I think we're good to go, but we must be very quiet. The pirate is asleep, but he is very close to our exit. There are a couple of wooden barrels to the left of the hatch. Head for them and hide. Stan nodded, his unspent injury bouncing his head up and down like a nodding dog on crack. Barry raised the lid on the hatch and placed it to one side. The sudden explosion of fresh air almost made him cough as he hit the back of his throat. He slithered out of the hatch as it hit the back of his throat. And crouched. Oh, I'm going to do that again. Hold on one second. Boom, boom, boom. He slithered out the hatch and crouched over the exit, eyeing the snoring pirate. Catching whiff of the cool sea air, Stan shot out of the conduit and scampered behind the barrel while Barry replaced the hatch. Once the hatch was secure, Barry twisted and slithered his long frame around the barrels and sidled up to Stan, who thought Barry resembled Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four. Now what do we do? Stan whispered, relieving his pent-up energy through the series of little press-ups. Barry shook his head in disbelief as he scanned the deck. Something caught his eye. Look, over there, he whispered, and pointed towards the opposite side of the deck where a piece of thick cloth was covering a mound of equipment, held down at each corner by heavy lumps of iron. Stan followed his gaze. Oh, looks like a pile of junk. Well, maybe it is, but there may be a rope hidden among it. What do you think? Well, it's a bit exposed, Stan replied, spinning his arms around quietly. Well, it is, but you should be okay once you've slipped under the cloth out of sight. Stan snapped back like a bolt of lightning. What do you mean I should be okay? I'm not going. Barry pursed his lips and sucked in a mouthful of air. Stanley, my twitchy friend, I cannot go as I'm too tall. You, my friend, are the right candidate for this mission. Stan screwed up his face. Mission? All we're doing is pinching a bit of rope from Rug's mad scheme. Yes, we are. Now off you go. I'll keep watch. Stan twitched involuntarily as Barry stood up and peeked out over the stacked barrels. See, Stan, you need to go. You need to burn off some energy. Stan stared at how freakishly tall Barry was and concluded that he looked like a cartoon character. He also found it hard to disagree with him. He was in need of some light exercise, and reluctantly he crawled out from behind the barrels and shingled along the splintered wooden deck. Barry watched as Stan's feet disappear under the thick cloth. A stand-shaped lump appeared intermittently as he shuffled around the pile of equipment. A couple of minutes passed before his bushy, unshaven face came back into view. I found some, he whispered. Barry nodded. How much do we need? Barry shrugged. I don't know. Stan sighed and crawled back under the cloth, reappearing moments later with a coil of thick rope. He crawled back to the barrels, pushing the rope across the deck towards Barry, who smelled the size of Stan's spine. How much rope you got? Said Barry. Stan stared at the huge coil. A lot. Barry sniffed the air and farted. Come on, let's go. He crept back to loose. Hold on. That should do it. Uh-oh. Stan stared at the Barry sniffed the air and farted. Come on, let's go. He crept back to the loose wooden panel, stealthily removing it and signaled Stan to edge forwards with the rope. As Stan poked his way towards the open hatch, they heard something stirring. Another fart rang out into the air. Barry turned towards the pirate and froze, his face filled with fear. Finding himself still a guest in the dweller's tunnel, the Clayton sneer picked himself up off the floor again. He lost count of the number of times he'd been thrown back into the tunnel by what he was now calling the little bastards. His arms were bruised and his legs were red with scratches and cuts caused by the impact of hitting the ground hard. He was tired, hungry, and very, very mad. But people like Clayton didn't learn from their mistakes. They continued on their self-righteous path toward destruction, normally ending up on the losing side. And Clayton, being Clayton, was definitely on the wrong side of the dwellers. We're not bothered about how many times Clayton would attempt to leave. In their crazy little world, Clayton was a plaything. However, people eventually become bored with their playthings, even dwellers, and now the dwellers were bored. As Clayton stormed the pyramid of little bastards, blockading the exit for the umpteenth time, the dwellers simply swung open like a barn door. Clayton expected a sharp return to his Clayton expected a sharp return to his starting point, realized he was finally free, and then he realized he was going too fast with a sharp bend that hove into sight. And then he realized the bend was no barrier, and it was a sheer drop-off. And when he looked back, he realized the dwellers were watching with devious smiles. And then he vanished over the edge. This was going to hurt. A foggy haze of sluggishness clouded the waking pirates as he stared at Barry and Stan. Confusion filtered across his face as he slowly put two and two together and came up with 5. Seeing the pirates stir, Stan dived into the hatch, shouting, "Woohoo!" and holding on to one end of the rope, leaving Barry frozen to the spot as the rope uncoiled rapidly by his feet. The pirate scratched his head and appeared to smile. It took another 5 seconds of polite smiling as the non-lubricated cogs in his brain struggled to return before the lights finally flickered on behind his eyes. Jumping to his feet, he stood up and drew his sword. Gone was the pleasant smile, now replaced with an angry, toothless growl. Swinging the sword from side to side, the groggy pirate advanced on the frozen Barry. Full of excess wind, Barry bottom began to sink of hope and glory as farts emanated at high speed. He needed to unfreeze, and he needed to unfreeze fast. Stan crashed to the bottom of the vertical conduit with a heavy thud. Meters of rope followed, clattering onto his head as he disappeared under a mountain of intertwined hemp. Moments later, he emerged from the top of the pile, panting, and noticed the rope was stretched taut all the way back up to the hatch. He gave it a light tug, but it didn't move. He stared up into the conduit at the black square of the opening. Baza, he whispered. There was no response. Baza, he whispered again, only louder this time. Still nothing. Stan pulled hard on the rope, but felt something move. Swinging his sword as aggressively as he could, the now fully functioning pirate lunged at Barry, hoping to slice him into little chunks. And as the foul-smelling man of the seas swung his blade to administer the killer blow, something pulled from under Barry's foot, and he lost his balance and fell backwards. The tip of the sword skimmed Barry's shirt, slicing it open as he fell back just enough to prevent any bodily injury. The pirate swung again, but was all in vain. Barry toppled backwards into the conduit and crashed down onto a startled Stan. Baza, Stan spluttered up from under the making one slender frame. Are you all right? Barry looked at himself up and down. My shirt, he cried. The missus is going to kill me now. Well, she better hurry up, said a voice from above, because I plan on killing you right now. You bloody pirate, Barry shouted, looking up. What have you done to my shirt? Harry Bianchi was a mild-mannered individual, and anger was not part of his DNA. Although on occasion he had been known to lose it and write a strong-worded letter to the authorities. The pirate looked down onto Barry's seething face and seemed to lose track of what he was doing. Yeah, sorry about that. I meant only to cut you in half. No, you missed. Who's going to pay for this then? Hissed Barry. The pirate stared into the conduit and thought for a moment. Man, not be me, or it be low coin pirating. I assume it depends on who you rob, Stan said with a disapproving tone. The pirate laughed. Are you serious? You don't rob from anyone anymore. It's now a profession. See, we'd be paid to sail the seas and stay out of real trouble. You have no idea, have you? Yeah, occasionally we might knock someone off, but a normal day consists of... Pirate stopped mid-sentence as a blunt instrument struck his head hard. His eyes momentarily rolled around in confusion, his legs turning to jelly, and the night shift pirate fell head first into the hatch. His arms, seemingly reaching out into the conduit towards Barry and Stan, but disappeared back over the lip of the hatch as somebody or something dragged the pirate backwards. Fear replaced in Barry's newly found bravado, and a fresh smell of bottom berths assaulted their noses. What's going on? Stan asked, looking up into the gloom of the night through the hatch. I have no idea, replied Barry, but I think we should make an exit and fast. Stan nodded, his eyes growing wider. That will not be necessary, said another voice from above the hatch. The wooden boards creaked as a figure approached the opening. Holding their breath and holding on to each other, Stan and Barry peered skywards as the face came into view. Zodiac! Squealed the two buddies. All right, we're going to stop there. Chapter 16, The Team Captain Returns, is the next one. And that's kind of a long chapter. And then we'll be doing 17. I love Turning the Tide. I can't wait. That's one of my favorites. That's the battle that will end all battles. So that's it for today. I'm sorry it's been so short. It's hardly been over half an hour. But that's reading for today on Ledge of Creation. Toward the Ledge. We'll be reading chapter 16. And I can look at it again. Hold on. A team captain returns. Yeah, you should. I just said that. You think I'd remember? So that's it. And I look forward to seeing you again on our next reading, which will be today's Friday. Today's Friday. So we'll be doing the next reading on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And I look forward to seeing you. So I hope you'll be here. I hope you'll be looking forward to hearing the next chapter. This is, again, available on Amazon and I think other places, but kind of like predominantly through Amazon. I've added the links. You can get it. And when we're done with this, which will be in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be bringing, I've got over up here, I've got Sheriff in a Small Town 1 and 2. We've read those. I have just finished editing book 3. So by then, I hope to have the paperback copy. And as soon as we're done with this, I'll start reading book 3 of Sheriff in a Small Town, a new sheriff. So I look forward to reading that. I look forward to seeing you, and hope you will be here on Tuesday for the next reading. And I was going to say Sheriff in a Small Town, Ledge of Creation, Toward the Ledge by Steve Wolf. So be good to yourself. And I look forward to seeing you.